Okay, hi everyone, welcome. So it's so nice to be back. And so for some of you who know me or my teaching a little bit, like the Sefirat HaOmer time. Hi Miriam, so nice to see
Hi.
you. Hi. Um,
Hi.
is something that I really love to teach. Like I've taught different series about it a few times, the whole idea of the Sefirot. And this year I was like sitting and I was preparing, and I always like feel very connected to this topic, but all of a sudden, literally, as I was about to send out the email, something like struck me. And I felt like something new is birthing with it. Like I don't feel like I want to teach it the way I taught it before. And I feel like I wanted like kind of shift things. And then I remembered actually Michelle, who's not on the class today, she said she couldn't be here. She posted a question on the WhatsApp group about understanding the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and what does it have to do with the Sefirot and where we are in cosmic history. And I got really excited. I said, wow, you know what? I think this is it. This is what's coming through to me. I really want to share about the Sefirot because it is the time of Sefirat HaOmer. And so when we have a certain energy, a spiritual energy available for us, I really believe we want to go with it. We want to like really explore it because it's the energy that's downloading in the world. But I want to take it a little shifted, a little bit different, to shift it really about and understand it from the lens a little bit more of relationships, about how it affects the dynamic of relationships. And first of all, relationships always do start with ourselves. Now, also another thing that I want to say is I feel like this topic, I think I was thinking about it. Why was I a little bit maybe not ready before this to actually teach this? Because I think it brings up a lot of emotions for people, this topic of gender. And I want to start by saying that when we speak about feminine and masculine energies and connected to the Sefirot, which are the Sefirot are the divine blueprint for the world. Like everything in this, just like the physical world, again, is made up of protons, neutrons, electrons. Everything has DNA, a DNA structure to it, an atomic structure. Everything is also reflected the same thing in the spiritual world. So the spiritual world, there's the same, you could say proton, neutron, electron, spiritual structure of the spiritual world. And that is these 10 divine attributes with which God created the world, with which God sustains the world at all times. And the reason that it's so powerful and where it brings us so much empowerment to learn about them is because the reason that God created the world, or this is the spiritual energy of the world, is because again, God created us to be godlike. Like he implanted the soul within us, which is a piece of God within us. And we are able to be godlike. How? Because we have these divine attributes within us. We have our emotional makeup. Our being is made up of our intellectual makeup, and even our body is all an expression of this divine energy. So we are able to be like it says Adama, Adam is called man, and his name Adam he is Adamel Elyon. He is made in the image of God. And how is he really made in the image of God? Because his spiritual DNA, his spiritual structure is these 10 godly sefirot, the 10 godly attributes. And that gives us that ability to really not only connect to God as something outside of us, but to connect to God as something that is deeply within every cell of our body, within every part of our being, within every bit of brain matter and gray matter in our mind and our thinking and our consciousness and our emotional world and our physical body. Like everything it has the ability to be transformed, and you can say almost like translucent, in the sense that it is an expression of God, that there is a piece of God within us. So with that said, yeah, so we are in the time of Sefirat HaOmer, which is, again, we're coming from Passover, this holiday of Passover, which is the time that we came out of Egypt. And we spoke a lot about this in the classes, how coming out of Egypt is not just coming out of physical Egypt like we did in history in the past, that it says actually every single day we have a commandment to remember coming out of Egypt, because it's a process, it's a constant process that we're going through, is coming out of our own personal Egypt, our own personal constricted consciousness, our own personal challenges, our perspectives and way of seeing things, and the dynamics of relationships. And there's so much constriction within that, and there's so many challenges within that, and we have the ability every day to come out of Egypt. But Passover was kind of like a turbo boost to do that. And what happens, we didn't come out of Egypt just to come out of Egypt and be free people because we're free on our own. Like Karen actually said in the beginning of the class, that we came out of Egypt, and what happened? We got the Torah. It was a process in order for us to get the Torah, because if we were just free, we would become a reckless, ruthless, destructive people. But actually receiving the Torah is actually boundaries for creation. The Torah brings structure and order to creation. If we were left to our own free will and our own, using our own desires and ways that we think the world should function, I mean, we've seen what happens, actually. We've seen that very clearly in world history, and we're seeing it presently in world history. So thank God, as the Jewish people, we got the Torah, which is, again, like a boundary for creation. It gives us structure in creation, and it gives us a structure of how we're supposed to live our lives, and how we're supposed to wake up in the morning, and how we're supposed to tie our shoes, and how we're supposed to relate in relationships, and how we're supposed to make money and use our money. And these are all really gifts, because that gives us our ultimate freedom when we can actually be free to actually be ourselves, because we have a container and a set of law and order of how to do that. But I love this whole idea that this is something that really touched me very deeply this year. I thought about it a lot, that, God, we came out of Egypt and we were a traumatized nation. Like, if you think about it, we came out of Egypt, we just experienced the most degrading, horrific enslavement. Really, I mean, the only thing, like, I guess, unfortunately, this has been repeated many times in history. I mean, my grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. There's plenty of places in the world where there's horrific tragedies, and we've experienced this a lot. But when you think about that, it was a huge trauma. Men were doing women's jobs, women doing men's jobs. And what happened? We were so traumatized, and God didn't just say, okay, you came out of Egypt, you're free now. Now I'm going to give you the Torah. God said, you know what? I'm going to give you these 7 weeks, which is basically, he took us out of Egypt and he brought us to the desert in order to really heal, in order to have time. Like, you're in the desert. Think about the desert. I don't know if any of you have ever visited the desert. Thank God we had the privilege. We were there 2 years ago. It's absolutely incredible. The desert is a place that's quiet. There's no noise. You just hear the howling winds, and there's no rustling of trees, even, because there are no trees. And it's a place where you can really ground and really feel this awesomeness of the world, this vast, infinite universe, because you look outside and you just almost can see you feel like you could see till infinity. And basically, God gave us that time to actually heal. So this time of Sefirat HaOmer, I feel it gives us a lot of information and a lot of perspective of our own growth. That God is like, we can't just go from trauma to getting it all together and becoming a nation, right? God's like, no, you need time to heal. And what happened during this time? Every single week, we get to work on a different one of these godly emotional attributes in order to really prepare ourselves, prepare our vessels, prepare our bodies, prepare our consciousness, prepare our emotions, in order to receive this gift of the Torah, where we actually really are truly free. Because when we actually receive the Torah and we have a set of structure and law and order, it actually gives us the ultimate freedom. That's the truth. So with that said, I wasn't planning on giving such a long introduction, but I think it's kind of like an important just perspective to understand a little bit more about like where we're at and to understand like, you know, the this time period that we're in. But I want to now focus a little bit more now. So we said that God created the world with these 10 Sefirot, these 10 divine attributes. And the way that this world was created, in the blueprint of creation, there are masculine energies and feminine energies. It's just the way God created the world. So again, I want to take this conversation away from gender per se, even though, yes, it is expressed in gender. But it's important to also understand, because this could be very triggering for some people, because they may learn about what is feminine energy and what is masculine energy, and they may feel, wow, I have a lot of masculine energy in me, but I'm a female. And I'll say that could be very, very, very true. Like I myself, when I started learning this, started realizing, wow, you know, I do have a lot of naturally within me, like masculine energy. And once I started learning about understanding feminine energy, I was able to actually, a lot of that masculine energy for me came through trauma, and it was like a coping mechanism as I realized, you know. And at the same time, it's also a gift that I have, you know, so it's not to like say, oh, I'm a female, so I want to just be feminine. I think there are people that do think that way, you know, and I just become total understanding of feminine energy and lose my masculine side. No, the masculine side is very, very important as well. And that's who we are. We're both. We have all of this within us. But the more we can understand those energies as a male, as a female, gender, we can understand them, the more we can actually, I think, feel empowered to really be ourselves. And at the same time, know maybe a little bit where we can twinge things or maybe work on certain things to kind of feel more balanced. Because in the world, it really comes down to everything is about a balance of energy, in essence. So I brought for you, this is something I'd created a while back. It's not very pretty. It's not color-coded or anything, because it really should be, because that's, the sphere really are a color-coded. There's colors for each of them, but I just quickly just put this together once. So I want to understand basically the structure of it, to understand what is feminine, what is masculine. So it's divided into, as you see, right and left. Okay, so the right side of all the Sefirot are considered the masculine side of the tree of life. So, and we're going to get into, don't get stuck on the names, because we'll go into the names as we explain more. So we have Chachma, which is the week of, which is kindness or love energy, is a masculine energy. I'm sorry, Chachma. Chachma means is divine wisdom. Okay, and that's a very big topic. We'll get into that. That is actually considered a masculine energy. Chesed, which is kindness or love, is also another masculine energy. And Netzach, which is the implementation of the kindness and loving energy, which actually is translated also as endurance or fortitude or, endurance, and I would say fortitude, and eternal as well, is also masculine. And then the left side of the Sefirat tree, Bina, which is intelligence, Gevura, which is discipline, which is actually the week that we're in right now. Tonight, right now in Israel, is Sefirat of Gevura. And Hod, which is acknowledgement or surrender or humility, is also considered a feminine energy. Now, all of these in total are actually, if we look at the tree as a whole, and this is something that we'll explain as well, all the seven emotional Sefirot are considered, I'm sorry, the 6 emotional Sefirot are actually considered masculine, and Malchut is considered as well feminine. Malchut is like the vessel that holds it all. It's like the final receiver that receives the light of all the other Sefirot. Okay, so that was just like a little overview, and we're going to get more into it over the next few weeks as we go into it, but I think it's important to understand it first. Okay, now again, before we can jump in, when I planned this class, again, I had planned that we're going to just speak about Chesed tonight and love. But I want to, again, because we're taking the focus now more on feminine and masculine energies, I want to discuss a little bit more about this fixing of feminine and masculine energies within creation as well, okay? Now, some of you may be more familiar with this than others, and I don't want to go into this as the full class, even though this really does require a class of its own, but I want to just introduce it here, and maybe in the future we could do a whole class on this. Basically, when the world was created, right, the world was created on the first day of creation. The world was created, it says Yom Echad, the first day, was a day of light. Echad also means one. It was a day of just oneness, right? There was masculine energy, feminine energy. It was a day of total oneness within the world. Then we had each day of creation. And what happened on the fourth day of creation, it says there was the creation of the two luminaries, the sun and the moon, were created on the fourth day of creation. Now, the sun, Kabbalistically, is considered masculine. Because if you think about it, the sun is always constantly shining light. It's always giving. It's always, that's its role. And what is the nature of the moon? If you think about the moon receives from the light of the sun. It's receptive, right? And feminine energy is receptive energy. It receives the light of the sun. So they were both created on the fourth day of creation, and they were both created equal in size. Right now, the moon is a huge, I mean, how much greater in light than the sun? The sun is how much greater in light than the moon. But initially, in the fourth day of creation, they were created equal. And it said that the moon complained. How could it be that two kings are wearing one crown? It says that the moon actually complained about this. She had a problem with this. And she complained. And what happened was, it says that God actually diminished the moon and made the moon small, okay? And the moon actually became small. Now, the moon, again, we said, is the moon. The moon is also that feminine energy. It's the Shekhinah, God's presence in the world. But the moon was diminished. Now, again, this is a whole conversation, and I don't want to really focus on this as a conversation, but it's very important in understanding, again, this dynamic of feminine and masculine energies, that the feminine energy already at the fourth day of creation was diminished, okay? But it says that right there in the beginning of creation, that it wasn't diminished forever. It was diminished for a temporary time, but it was a descent for the sake of an ascent. That the moon will eventually rise up and become actually as great as the light of the sun. So it was like a temporary descent, a temporary diminishment in order for a greater ascent. And this is actually, again, we could have a whole class and a whole discussion on this, but the Arizal speaks about this idea of the evolvement of the moon. He says that there are 7 stages of the evolvement of the moon, that the moon is rising throughout creation. Feminine energies are rising throughout creation, throughout creation and throughout history, throughout cosmic history. Feminine energies are rising. Now we see this a lot. Like we saw this a lot, with the hippie revolution, and then we had feminism came on the scene where feminists were like, taking over and making a big rah-rah about feminine energy rising in the world. And that was, again, reflective of the fact that we're coming in closer and closer and closer to redemption, where the moon and the sun are going to share one crown. They're going to be equal in light. That was a very, very big part of this process of the feminine energies rising, the feminist movement. Now, again, the feminist movement they were tapping into something very, very, very deep and very, very true and very, very spiritually aligned to the truth of creation. Now, did they go about it 100% the right way? That's like a whole discussion in and of itself. But I have to say that it was actually a very, very good thing. And it was very much a sign of the fact that feminine energies are rising in the world. And, I see this a lot, even in general, when we're going to learn more about what are feminine and what are masculine energies, the feminine energy of receiving, which is more about slowing down and mindfulness and more tenderness and softness and more of that gentleness and presence, is becoming an embodiment, somatic work embodiment. You see this like very much coming out in the world where, I was actually listening to this podcast recently by this big CEO of a company, and he was actually saying, it was so fascinating how he looks for workers that have these, like, it's something is when he is trying to hire workers and get employment, he's looking for those characteristics because he sees those are workers that work well with teams. And it's not like the stereotypical male boss who's now looking for the men that are just workaholics and working and not present and not mindful and not present to, but he values very much. He was saying, I don't remember which company he was the head of, but it was like a massive company with I don't know how many thousands and thousands of workers, but he has meditation sessions, for his workers and mindfulness meetings because he realized that helps their productivity. And I just thought it was so fascinating because he's really showing that there's been such a shift in the world where these feminine energies are actually becoming more valued, even amongst amongst men and even amongst the workforce as now in today's time. So that was the story of the moon and the sun. Now I want to get into, again, a little bit about the creation of the first male and female, Adam and Chava. It says when Adam and Chava were originally in Genesis were created, Adam and Eve were created as one androgynous being. They were one. It was just one androgynous being. And then what happened? It says that there was what's called Kabbalistically a nisirah, which was like a splitting and or uncoupling, where Chava, Eve, was taken from, some people say the rib, some people say the side of Adam, and she became her own independent woman. But initially, they were one androgynous being, and they were created when this original Adam and Eve were created. They were created actually, it says back to back. Their backs were together. And it says throughout cosmic history, it says Kabbalistically, the journey of the divine feminine and the divine masculine are to go from being back to back to becoming face to face, which is also a very huge topic in and of itself. And anyone who's in relationships, who's married or in relationships at all, knows that it's so easy as couples, to be living back to back, where you're living unconscious, which is essentially unconscious, where your trauma and my trauma just butt head to head. And we just it's too painful to face that trauma. So we just stay that way, and it's a very common place to be and a very painful place to be. And the journey of really doing the work as a couple and in the relationship of a male and female and a husband and wife, and is to really become then face to face, which is essentially becoming more and more and more conscious, which is a lot of healing work. And I think that beyond the fact that yes, there's healing that happens on a very individual level, and a lot of it is going into the trauma that you had and the way you were raised and the way he was raised, and a lot of the patterns that we created and the beliefs and the wiring that we have about relationships. But also understanding a lot of becoming face to face is really understanding more about what is true feminine, what does a divine feminine look like, and what does a divine masculine look like. Because when we understand that more, we don't have to go and try to heal and try to come to understanding ourselves kind of in a blind way, with blindfolds on, which is unconscious. But we can actually realize that there are spiritual truths that are in the world, which are spiritual dynamics of feminine and masculine energies that can actually help us to become much more face to face, to understand each other in a much deeper way, to understand each other's nature, to understand each other's just makeup, our basic makeup, which is beyond just the way we were raised and the trauma maybe that we experienced, or the love or the lack of love, and the way we give love and the way we receive love, understanding the way it is just Kabbalistically, the feminine and masculine. There's a lot of healing that actually comes just from that in and of itself. And we see this actually, this whole image of back to back and then face to face. We see this also from, on the altar, we have the cherubim, the kruvim, which were like two, they look like two children. And it says that when they were, when the Jewish people were in alignment with God's will, they were face to face, which means that when the Jewish people as a whole were conscious and were connected and in alignment, they were face to face. And when not, they were also back to back. And the journey, again, is always face to face, consciousness, alignment, which is aligning to God within us, aligning to our true essence, to our true core. And a lot of that does, again, come through the feminine and masculine energies, Now, we also see, it's very interesting, because Adam and Eve were created as one androgynous beings, and then they were separated. There is always a drive for oneness, for unity, to come back. Like, I mean, it's painful for people, and I'm really, again, I'm speaking to people here. There's people that are married, there are people that are single. And, bless everyone who wants to get married, that they should find their soulmate. It is a very painful place to be, and a very lonely place to be, when people feel, either single and they're never found their other half, or to even be in the dynamic of a relationship and feel alone could be one of the most painful places really to be in, because there really is always a yearning for oneness and connection, because we were created in that way, that we were one, and we're supposed to go, we were created back to back, but our journey is to be face to face.